Aloha, it's Dave Lawrence. How you doing? Big mahalo for tuning in today. We're speaking with a guy whose voice has a familiar, soothing sound. He's a talented vocalist, a guitarist, songwriter you first started hearing on the radio 2 decades ago. He and his band made it to the air with several catchy songs like All I Want, Fall Down, Something's Always Wrong, to name just a few. He also has a side project, which is fascinating, and I'm looking forward to hearing about, WPA, Works Progress Administration. And they have an interesting gig coming up, too. Solo music will be exploring, all featuring his trademark vocals. He and his main group, however, are heading our way, thankfully. It's a pleasure to welcome Toad, the Wet Sprocket frontman and founder, Glenn Phillips. Aloha and mahalo, Brother Glenn.
How do you do?
I do good. How do you do? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Awesome. How much experience, first of all, do you personally have with the islands?
Not a ton. I think I've been out a half a dozen or a few less times. My family's gone to Kauai 3 times, and I've played in Honolulu a couple of times. Spent a couple days, had some friends who were on the Hana Trail on Maui.
The road to Hana goes like a...
Road to Hana, yeah, they were down there. So I've been here and there, never been to the Big Island. So looking forward to being back. And I think Toad only played once. We played in Honolulu like one time, had a great, crazy show, and never made it back. So looking forward to being back with the band again.
Oh, that'll be nice. And what are your memories of when you came, if you can try to put a date on it, and some of the things that you did while you were here?
The main thing I remember, there are a few places that we played that we had absolutely no idea how crazy it would be. And strangely enough, Salt Lake City and Honolulu were the 2 cities where we felt more like we were in a rock band than anywhere else we played. Because we're kind of a mellow band, and usually people just hang out. I just remember people going crazy. It was so fun. How can I say, the degree of appreciation for when a band makes it out there and goes out and plays a show it was just really easy to see how happy people were to have a concert, and how it was just a ton of fun.
That's a good point. We don't get as many shows, and that's nice that you were able to sense the enthusiasm and appreciation from the audience. When was approximately what year, roughly?
Oh, it would have been 92, 93, something like that.
Oh, wow. Right at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad that we never made it back.
You mentioned being on Kauai. When was your last visit to the islands?
I think my last visit, a couple of years ago, I know I played it, I think it was Anna Bananas.
So a solo visit?
Yeah, just did a solo visit. I have a cousin who's a doctor out there, visited him, and a couple friends in Honolulu. So just had a great time, got to bring my kids out, and a couple of family friends, put a show in the middle there. Always enjoy being out on the islands.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, so you do have family out here and friends who live in Honolulu?
Not Honolulu, actually. I have some friends out in Kapa'a.
Nice.
Yeah.
When you think of Hawaii and your handful of experiences that you've had out here, what is your favorite experience or experiences that really left an impact on you? Oh,
God. Favorite experience is probably just hiking the Nepali coast. The land is so unbelievable. It's just, the degree of beauty is really stunning. And the pace of things, is the other part of it, is that it's not as fast, not as crazy as a lot of places are. It seems like people live at a pace that is more conducive to life.
And when you think of your music, too, it would seem like a good blend there, what you're saying, the mellowness, the laid-back quality.
Yeah, it plays off well. And, people always ask, with Santa Barbara being from here, if there's, some place that, where I grew up, has to do with the kind of music I make. And it's hard to understand what that question is, because I've only come from one place, so I don't know what I'd be like if I were from Chicago. But the more I travel around, the more I realize there really is something about living in a place that embraces you. And I know I have friends who are out in places who, they move to California and they miss their heavy winters and they miss the spring and they miss their seasons. But there is really something about being in a place where kind of most days you can just walk outside and head out into the hills and not be afraid of freezing to death. I think it lets you feel like the world's a more embracing place.
Well, it's ironic as you say that. I was remember in the early 90s, and I was music director of my college station. I just interviewed Santana, and I was talking to his publicist on the phone, this woman, Susan, and I remember she said something which you just made me remember, and she was describing California versus the East Coast, and how people on the East Coast, because of the cold and the weather, have so many layers that they wear to stay warm that it tends to impact their personalities, and that the West Coast was very much the way you just described it.
Mm-hmm. We have problems too. I mean, we I think we could easily be criticized for oversharing, but it takes all kinds.
I've never been to Santa Barbara.
Oh, I mean, it's a beautiful town. It's just this little sliver of land between the mountains and the ocean. The main difference is that our water is about 50 degrees usually. So you go here, and we get a lot of people who are tourists who you'll see hanging out on the edge of the water, and they just can't get themselves to go in because it's never as warm as they think it'll be. It's a beautiful, chaparral in the mountains, kind of a dry, deserty, shrubby place, but it can be a numbingly beautiful place, but it's certainly an incredible place to grow up, a great place to have kids. And, for a small town, we have our university, we have a lot of brain power and a lot of creativity. Also, I think we have one of the highest per capita, NGOs, things like Direct Relief International is based out of here, and a lot of people just really doing interesting work.
It must be pretty laid back because the way you sound, the way your music sounds, it'd be a cool place to visit. I have to make it my business to check it out. Fans who are checking out your shows in the islands are probably curious what to expect.
We're mostly sticking to the favorites. We have a kind of legacy with our catalog, and so we're going to be working in maybe a couple of songs out of my solo catalog just to bring in, and we're working up some new stuff, so hopefully by the time we make it out, there will be a couple new songs in the set. But we make a point. We realize people are there to hear the songs they know from us, so there will be All I Want and Fall Down and Walk on the Ocean and all of those. It's a full-on electric rock show.
That's nice. And how did those dates come up?
We just got a call from, I guess we had a fan out at these resorts, and he asked if we would please come by. And nobody'd asked for a while, so we said yes. I know the recession had hit the islands hard, and so we hadn't been able to figure out a way of getting out there. We're really happy to be able to head in again.
And had Toad played outside of Honolulu, or was there just one Toad show, period, for the entire state previously?
I think there was one Toad show in the entire state. It's kind of embarrassing.
Well, hey, at least you made it here.
That's true.
And there's some people who haven't even done the one, Glenn. So the thing about you that's kind of, I have a personal admiration for, you started really early. I mean, you were really, really young when you got this band going. And now with so many years of potential hindsight there, are there things about your career path that you think starting so young made a big impact on your direction?
I don't know. It was odd to find myself making music for a living, frankly. I think most people who end up getting to put out records, it's the singular drive in their entire life, and everything else is going to be secondary to it. And when we got signed, I was about 18 years old. We'd made our first two records independently already, and Sony re-released them. And so I'd planned on going away to college the next year. I hadn't even thought we had a chance of getting signed, and instead, kind of over that summer, I found myself in the middle of this new career. I mean, we always cared about doing well at what we did and working hard, but I don't think we believed so much in this rock and roll dream that we were going to, drop out of school or anything for it. So it's an odd experience. Here I am now, 20-something years later, and still kind of wondering, whoa, what should I go back to school? What am I going to do with myself?
That's exactly what I was thinking. What you just said.
But yeah, it was a very strange position to be in, and we always felt like outsiders just because we weren't very good at, I think, operating within that world. Probably I think it's some of our appeal, was, how can I say, before nerds were cool, and I don't mean nerds in terms of, kind of the current hipster style of ultra-stylized, trendy nerd. I mean, actual, people who study hard sciences, engineers. I think we were authentically more like that as people, and so had dealt with themes that other bands weren't necessarily dealing with, and from a point of view that other bands weren't approaching it from. We never had the coolest audience, but I think we had a really authentic and thoughtful audience, and they've been kind enough to stick around with us for a while.
I remember seeing you in, I think it was 1994 at the Orpheum in Boston. I used to work at BCN for a very long time, and I would describe your audience, much that way. And that's one of the funny things I think about when you were talking about growing up, and you're 18. I presume growing up in Santa Barbara, you would have been just on the cusp of college, and then here you are now, and you never made it back to school, huh?
No. I got in 2 years. I got out of high school early, so I had 2 years. I was planning on going to San Francisco, and the band's plan was that we were going to break up after that summer, and just we would have had this fun couple albums we'd done, but everything changed.
Didn't work out that way. When you think of who were the artists that it was the 80s, it was a very different time, and your sound was so different than a lot of the schlockery that you and I were being presented to consume. What was it that you were consuming?
Oh, there was a lot of great music. I mean, we denied it. Any band who sounds a lot like another band is going to deny it. We sounded a lot like REM. REM was great. Replacements, Whisker Du, Dinosaur Jr. was starting up then. There was a ton of great indie music coming out at that time. And then there were bands like, right around that period, Talk, not the kind of radio albums, but their last couple of albums, which are these just gorgeous tone poems. I just feel like they're a band like Sigur Rós, and there are all these bands that owe a great debt to them, but I think people know, once you hear their last couple records, once you hear Laughingstock and Spirit of Eden, it's very clear how seminal they were. But at the time, I think they didn't necessarily get a lot of public accolades. But after they stopped being played on the radio, once they became a great band instead of a good band. But Peter Gabriel was doing just amazing work. U2 was great. Elvis Costello was really, lyrically especially pushing things. Ton of great music.
Yeah, no, there was. It was just such a different scene entirely, and a lot of the music that you named tended to be somewhat more underground or indie or underneath the surface.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing, is to remember that REM and U2 were indie bands before they became
right.
Before they became these unstoppable monsters.
Right, with the exception of those two and Elvis, I guess, of the names you named. Those were all three pretty big by the time that you guys, U2 were a super group by the time that you broke. But nice to hear where your sound was coming from. When you Glenn, when you listen back to something like Bread and Circus, how does it sound to your ears today?
Oh, I can't listen to that record at all.
I was wondering, what...
Well, we recorded that thing, and I think it was recorded and mixed in 48 hours.
Amazing.
And so it's these out-of-tune live vocals, and I'm 16, and if it weren't me, it's kind of like, you finding some really sad, sensitive kid's diary and reading through it, and I can understand how people would enjoy that experience, but it's my diary, and I just can't look at it. I cannot go there.
Dude, it's like listening to some of my early interviews or whatever. I completely know what you're saying. I
get the appeal, but never for me.
No, totally. What's your best memory or memories of the mid-'90s peak of the band?
We had a lot of really good times. Meeting up with Willie Porter, meeting Ben Folds when we were on the Horde tour. That was awesome. The whole Horde tour. Morphine was playing, Ben Folds 5, Neil Young. Neil Young ran over my Frisbee, or at least his bus driver did.
I remember that year, 97.
They smashed my Frisbee.
It's terrible.
That was a pretty cool tour. Getting to tour with Geggy Ta, once again, a band, I don't know, people know, like Greg, the main, one of the two guys in the band he produces Lily Allen, and he's in The Bird and the Bee, but they were just incredible people to be on the road with.
I remember them.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say, because, it's different there were a few experiences of going, oh, so I guess this is the rock thing. We're doing it. We played, well, probably the most rock and roll experience ever was when John Bon Jovi came out and he sang, we did kind of a waltz campfire version of Rock and Roll All Night by Kiss. We thought it was really silly. And he came out and sang that with us at Madison Square Garden in New York once. And it was so great because it was right at the height of, the grunge era and the other bands. It was Hole and Henry Rollins and Green Day and everybody was all edgy. And, we weren't. And the crowd was all supposed to be too cool to still like him. And he came out and the place just went completely nuts. It was so like to be on stage like, well, that's what a real rock star does. Damn.
That's an awesome memory.
Yeah. But it's actually kind of vindicating. I love the fact that as the indie scene has kind of grown and, it's this huge, great thing now, the leaders of it were, when we were out, it was just like the most uncool thing you could do was be sensitive and have feelings. You needed to be edgy at all times. And it was so competitive for that. And I love the fact that, the coolest bands in the world now are Iron and Wine and, are all sensitive guys with feelings. We just did it 10 years too early.
You were pioneers.
I suppose.
Got to look at it that way. You have this project I'm curious about, the Works Progress Administration, WPA. You have some interesting connections in that. How did that come together, and what brought Benmont tension?
I've been friends with the guys in Nick Creek for, I guess, about a decade now, a little more than a decade. And they'd broken up. We'd done a project before called Mutual Admiration Society and wanted to do another with Sean and Sarah Watkins, and I've been saving up songs for that. And there's a club in Los Angeles called Largo, and they have a regular show there called Watkins Family Hour, and Benmont had been sitting in with them for a while. I'd met him before. He'd actually played organ on a song for Toad. He played on Brother. And Pete Thomas had been on tour. Pete Thomas is Elvis Costello's drummer, and just one of the most best drummers on the planet, basically. And so we just got these 8 people together. Sean and Sarah, Benmont Tench, Davey and Pete as the rhythm section, and Greg Lease on pedal steel, and cut a record. And then it took us about 2 years to get the damn thing out. But, it was a lot of fun, labor of love for everybody involved with it.
And you have a project, you guys are doing that crazy cruise with so many, it's a sold-out thing.
Yeah, that's that's the Cayamo cruise. It's going off to the Caribbean, and it's a pretty amazing thing. I mean, it's, who's the lineup this year? It's like John Hyatt, Richard Thompson, Steve Earle, Brandon Carlisle, Indigo Girls, I think Patty Griffin's on this year.
Yep.
So it's cool. I've been on other cruises that were more rock-oriented, and I can't handle partying that much. I have no interest in it, and this is much more of a kind of NPR crowd. It's like more kind of sober listening audience, and just great music to hear and really cool people to hang out with.
It's a nice lineup. The cruise racket, it's gotten big, to get a bunch of fans to go out and do that. I've never done it. It doesn't appeal to me for some reason, Glenn.
It doesn't appeal to me, except that it's an incredible amount of fun. I mean, the thing about Cayamo, it's like the cruise part of it is odd for me, but, we're getting to go out. It's going to be, WPA, we're kind of a 5-piece. Luke Bulla was no longer with us, but is going to come back and play some fiddle. And Dan Wilson from Semisonic is going to join us on some stuff and play a set of his own. But I get to see a lot of people I meet on tour and don't get to see otherwise. And my wife and I get a week, just to kind of, we can run off to our room if we want to. And we got 3 kids, so that's kind of an awesome thing to be able to do.
You bring in the kids?
No, we leave the kids. They're staying with their cousin. Good for you. And so, we get to have a week, and I get to see a whole lot of friends in one place who usually, as a musician, you're usually ships in the night. So it's really great to catch up with people and get to hang out. It's a really, really low-key vibe, and I would not have suspected I would enjoy it as much as I do. But I mean, as proof of how good it actually is, I mean, Sean Colvin's played on Kayamo a couple of times, and last year she wasn't booked, and she came out anyway just to hang out with her friends.
Oh, wow.
It's a pretty special event.
Oh, it sounds like it, and I was stoked to see that you were on it. It looked like it was not only going cool places, had a nice cast of fellow musicians, and I'm hoping that you have a splendid time. I leave you just with the thought that when you're coming through for Honolulu, you wanted to just bring an acoustic and visit our studios. We have this gorgeous performing studio. It's called the Atherton, holds up to 75 people. It's just dynamite for, lectures, gatherings, acoustic sets. Just keep in mind, if
make it work, I will definitely do that. I've actually was asking our agent if it would be possible for me to do something solo. We can't compete with the Toad Show, but I'm small potatoes. Maybe they'd let me do it.
It'd be potatoes I'd like to have, my brother.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome, and take care. Hopefully I'll get to see you soon.
Sounds good.
Aloha.
Aloha.